Mike, he got it to them before the deadline. Isn't that sufficient time? Like, then your deadline wasn't a real deadline then, is how I read that.
When is a deadline not a deadline? When it's not really the deadline. When the deadline was before the deadline. Everything the NFL
They had a secret
said,
deadline.
And when you look at the contents of the letter, we don't have enough information, we need to do an investigation, you didn't provide us things that we would need to resolve. Jeffrey Kessler, who represented Sorsby in his effort to keep his NCAA eligibility and who now may end up representing him if he sues the NFL, he issued a statement last night directly contradicting much of what the NFL said. We gave them what they asked for. They knew back in April he was going to do this. We submitted the application on the form they sent us 3 days before the deadline. We asked them, do you need anything else? And they said no, or at least they didn't respond, whatever the case may be. So that letter that came out yesterday was a PR tool. Yes, it was a legal document to an extent, framing the issues in the event that there's a legal fight. But the fact that that letter went to the media before it went to Brendan Sorsby, it tells you what that letter was. That letter was about getting people on board with the NFL slamming the door in Brendan Sorsby's face.
Mike, if this goes to, the courts, let's say, or I don't even know what court would it go to, and how could this get decided in time to allow for Sorsby to play in the NFL this season?
The most obvious location would be the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. That's the NFL's backyard. That's the federal court that has jurisdiction over the league. Possibly something could happen through a union grievance, but the union's in a tough spot here.
They don't represent Sorsby.
Sorsby's not a member.
Exactly.
Sorsby's not a member. So if you help Sorsby get picked in the supplemental draft and a team with 90 guys currently on the roster takes Sorsby, they're going to cut a current union member. You're helping a non-union member put a union member out of a job.
Right.
And that concept was actually mentioned in the old Maurice Clarrett case 22 years ago when he sued to try to fight the NFL's rule that you got to be out of high school at least 3 years to enter the draft. So federal court in New York makes the most sense. But what happens in a situation like this, because the Clarrett case didn't go well for the player, and that would fall under the federal court in New York umbrella. What you could do and what you could see happen, Kessler, if he gets the authorization to go forward, you look around the country and you look for a place where you think it would be more favorable to you, given the judges that are on that court, given the appeals court and their law that they have built up over the years. It's one of the most important functions for a lawyer, figuring out of all the possible places where a case can be filed, where should it be filed?
Do you get the sense, and I don't know if you've talked to anybody, this is completely like throwing a dart by me. Do you get the sense that like beneath the commissioner, like among the 32 teams, there are owners who think that this was a draconian measure by the NFL and that this guy, because there were tweets to this effect yesterday, like they've never really stated that they were going to cancel a supplemental draft for, yes, they said, well, we didn't have enough time, but they also like cited some morality part of it too, where he didn't like show requisite contrition or responsibility for his actions, and they've never taken that tack before.
There's nothing in the CBA as it relates to the supplemental draft that speaks to anything other than, one, were you not eligible for the draft when it happened in April? Two, have you since become eligible to be drafted? That's it. There's no integrity test. There's no purity test. There's no asterisk that says, after we have conducted a full and proper investigation of your character. None of that. The way that I think they would have the best chance to make this stick would be to say, we have the discretion, full discretion to decide whether or not to have a supplemental draft. But the response to that is very simple. Their pattern in practice has been when there's somebody who's eligible, they have a supplemental draft. There's never been a time where somebody was eligible and they said, you know what, we don't feel like it. We're not in the mood to do a supplemental draft. This is clearly aimed at Sorsby. And my theory is they would have preferred to just let him enter and then suspend him. That's what they did to Terrell Pryor.
Yep.
In 2011. They let him get drafted by the Raiders round 3. A month later, they suspended him for 5 games, matching the NCAA suspension that had been imposed on him. If they had done that, they got 2 guys on NFL rosters right now who did the same thing. Kayshon Boutte, Patriots receiver, underage betting on LSU while playing in LSU games. NFL never did a thing. NFL didn't even know about it until he was in the NFL for a year. Hunter Deckers, quarterback at Iowa State, bet on Iowa State, not when he was playing, but bet on Iowa State.
Yeah.
Lost his eligibility permanently, played community college football for a year when he came into the NFL. There was no, well, we're not sure we can let you into the draft. We have to do a review of your character and your integrity, and we have to come to a conclusion as to whether or not the things you did violate our policies and practices. And this is where it's important to set aside whatever you think about what Brendan Sorsby did and be committed to hold the NFL's feet to the fire, to follow their rules as written, and not just make it up as they go. Because they have a reputation for making it up as they go, and this is an example of them making it up as they go.
Mike, I don't think everyone watching or listening knows this, but your background is in law. You obviously don't know all the details of the case, but you have a good understanding of it. Do you think that Sorsby has a strong argument to force a supplemental draft?
Yeah, he does. And the question is, does he want to do it? And you talked about this earlier, like how could you get it done quickly? You go to federal court. I'm sorry, my dog's barking at something. You go to federal court and you ask for a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction or both, forcing the NFL to go forward while the case goes forward, because you have irreparable harm. Once the supplemental draft doesn't happen, once training camp's open, you're SOL if you're Brendan Sorsby. But I think that it's important in situations like this to set aside the legal analysis and ask the broader question, are my interests served by doing this? And when you think about the big picture here, Sorsby presumably wants to have a 15 to 20-year NFL career. Is this really the way you want to come through the front door?
Good point.
Because you heard, but they tend to hold a grudge. And the last thing you need is the NFL to be extra pissed off because you fought them and they lost, and now you're forcing your way in, and who knows what's going to be whispered in the back rooms to owners who might be interested in Brendan Sorsby, or people going to look the other way. It just creates a bunch of issues you don't need. So I think if this is my son, my nephew, my client, anyone that I know and that I'm trying to help, I'd say, you know what, this sucks. What they're doing to you is wrong. They are making up the rules as they go. They want their pound of flesh, but just let them have it. And let's come up with a good plan for the next 9 months as to how we're going to get you ready for the 2027 draft so you can be taken as high as possible and end up with the right team.
What do you think is the best plan then for the next 9 months for him?
I think you train, hire a quarterbacks coach, somebody who has tutored NFL players. You do as much as you can to work out, stay in shape, get yourself ready for the combine. That's going to be your opportunity. Go to the combine, do all the drills, do everything that's asked of you. And also, I think it makes sense to find a way to sit down and tell your story with someone who will ask you tough questions, not one of these hand-picked safe spaces that we see certain people go to where they know they're not going to be asked tough questions.
Yeah.
You want to be asked tough questions, and you want to answer the tough questions. And I also think you should start going around and meeting with football teams, basketball teams, high school and college. This is a great example for kids who have grown up in an age where sports betting isn't just legalized, it's normalized, and everybody's doing it. And it's not like the old days. Like 10 years ago, this is a different vibe, because to gamble 10 years ago, you got to cross the wrong side of the tracks. You got to go find Johnny Roast Beef. you got to run the risk that if you don't pay, right, they're going to break your thumbs. This is, you just pick your phone up and use your thumbs.
Yep.
It doesn't even feel like it's like I was saying the other day, when I get an Uber, it feels like it's free. You press a button and the car comes because everything's digital. You're not peeling out dollar bills and handing them to the bookie. So the world is so different than it was. And, it used to be, hey, you can't eat the fruit from the poisonous tree. Well, now everybody's eating it. There's going to be a small subset of folks who can't. And those guys need to understand they need to stand firm, even if everyone they know is betting. If you're an NCAA athlete, you can't do it, and look at the problems that you can cause for yourself if you do.
Mike, I think Sorsby has an imaging and PR problem. The thing I would try to do best if I were him and the people that were around him, they need to drive home the point, because I talked to people on the show yesterday that still don't get this or didn't know this. He's got to drive home the point that when he was the quarterback at Cincinnati, he never bet. And he showed discipline and an ability to not allow for that to corrupt him and potentially mess with the integrity of the game while he was on the field playing. He showed that he could do that for 2 years at Cincinnati, and I think that there's just a belief out there, an assumption that he bet while he was the Cincinnati quarterback, and there's zero evidence that that's true, right? None whatsoever.
Yeah, and there's two things here. No, you're right. I interviewed his agent, Ron Slavin, on PFTPM the other day, and Slavin says, and I assume this is true, that once Sorsby started playing, he did not bet on college football at all. His bets on Indiana and involving Indiana players were when he was on the roster but not playing. And so this isn't like Paul Crewe in The Longest Yard who threw a game. This is a guy who did what plenty of kids now do. They think it's like an extension of a video game. But secondly, there's this vibe out there that he must be punished. He hasn't been punished. Well, ask yourself this question. If he plays for Texas Tech this year, he's going to make $4 to $6 million.
Yep.
He's going to have an opportunity to join a pretty good team, maybe go undefeated, maybe win the national championship, maybe get the Heisman Trophy, and maybe become Fernando Mendoza next year. A year ago, we didn't know that Fernando Mendoza was going to be the number 1 overall pick, consensus for the NFL draft. You have a huge year at Texas Tech. You could be making $50 million on your contract next year. What's he going to make now? Nothing. Well, he's going to make a lot less than $50 million. It's going to be driven by wherever he gets picked. So he has suffered a punishment. I just feel like there's this vibe that he's got to miss a year of football. And that's what the NFL was thinking. He's got to miss a year of football. This is how we make it happen.